Well, hello everyone. Thank you very much for attending and finishing off Soccerex with a bang, where we're going to be celebrating 25 years of the Premier League. Time flies when you're having fun. I have some wonderful panellists here who are going to be giving us their insights and what they've enjoyed over the last 25 years, either playing, being instrumental in setting it up, managing, coaching, and also commentating on it as well. So thank you very much. My guests, we start with David Dein, just to my left here, of course, the former vice chairman of Arsenal, transformed them, of course, into one of the leading clubs, not just in Europe, probably in the world, if we're going to go big.
You can say that, I can't.
Yeah, I'll say it. Also, of course, the former vice chairman of the Football Association, and was involved in the creation of the English Premier League, and was president as well of England's 2018 World Cup bid. We have, alongside him, Mike Phelan, former footballer with Burnley and Manchester United. Then, of course, worked, enjoying most of your coaching career underneath Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. Had the pleasure of working with Mike as well, and in my role at Manchester United at television, having much fun and games when United were dominating and winning everything. So I had the time of my life there. He then, of course, moved on to Hull City this time last year, manager of the month.
Yes.
Yeah. So there we have it. That is Mike Phelan there for you. And we have as well, of course, Kolo Toure, legend, one of the stalwarts of that famous Invincibles Arsenal side, making over 220 appearances in his 8 years with the Gunners. He then went on to make a further 128 Premier League appearances, of course, for Manchester City and Liverpool, and helped City win their first league title in 44 years. You were offered an assistant coaching role with the Ivory Coast under-23 team in the Olympics. Yep. And you have another coaching role at the moment, which we'll go into a little bit later, because that's with the Scottish Premiership, isn't it? With Celtic, which was where, of course, you last played, and potentially going to be involved with the club yet again. Right, I'm very pleased to say we have Stan Collymore here, who's hot-footed it from somewhere around the world, yes, because he's turned footballer to broadcast journalist. Of course, played as a centre forward throughout most of the 90s, finished his career in 2001. Was actually held the English transfer record when moved from Nottingham Forest to Liverpool. It seems like nothing now. It was huge then, of course, £8.5 million in 1995, capped 3 times for England as well, and now works for Russia Today, just to clear that up. So you've been having fun of games, doing something actually a little bit different, right? It is, yeah, lots of propaganda, as you can imagine, apparently. No, we've just been to follow the Syrian national team in Malaysia, so following their story. If you haven't, just Google it. It's an amazing story, of course, war-torn country. They played yesterday against Iran, had to get a point and hope other results went for them, and they scored the last kick of the game, so they play Australia in a double-header. So quite an incredible story for a team that haven't played in their home nation for a couple of years now. Yeah, absolutely. Well, enjoy that. Hopefully you're going to enjoy the next 45 minutes or so. We've enjoyed, of course, 25 years of football, of the Premier League. Come on, David, let's get back to the very beginning. We're going to have a look at some of the highlights as well as some of the key standout seasons. But as for the meeting that happened to decide that you were going to do this, tell us all about that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hayley, it's a great question, and I can't do it justice in just a couple of minutes. But I think we're all looking at the audience here, we're all old enough to remember what football was like in England in the 1980s. Football in England was in trouble, big trouble. I mean, there was hooliganism, there was fighting inside the grounds of the fans, fighting outside of the grounds. Attendances were dropping, women were not going to the games, kids were certainly not going, mothers were worried about the children going for their safety, the stadiums themselves were dilapidated, something had to change. And I think in a way, the tragedy that happened at Hillsborough probably was one of the points that helped us make a decision, because we realised that if we didn't do something, the game wouldn't be worth watching. And you're in the television business. Well, people don't realise that in the mid-1980s, television actually pulled the plug on football for 6 months. There was no, when you think of all the football, wall to wall, every day of the week today, football was not on television for 6 months in the 1980s. The television broadcasters didn't want to be associated with the product. So I must say, the 5 of us who sat down that famous evening for dinner at the London Weekend Television Studios, hosted by the former chairman of the FA, Greg Dyke, who was then the programme controller for London Weekend. I mean, I have to say, we had a lot of guts to do it. It was a brave move, because the Football League had been going since the 1880s. It was over 100 years old. And we decided to break away and reform, rebrand it to create something new. So it was courageous, even I say myself.
I mean, could you have foreseen what was ahead?
Well, it's always nice with hindsight to say, yeah, sure we did. Well, all we knew, and I've said this before, I've used the same words, that we knew we had an aeroplane on the runway ready to take off. We didn't quite know how high it was going to fly. And it's just flown higher and higher every year. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful success story.
What was it like for you, Mike, obviously playing and seeing the changes happen before your very eyes?
Well, many changes happened. But I was part of the Manchester United team that won the first Premiership, and that was, huge to do that. Not just for the football club, but for every individual who played at that time. And the competition was huge. That was for sure. Some really strong teams in there, and some big clubs. So to actually win the first one as a player was enormous. And as it happened, it turned out to probably be a catalyst for Manchester United at the time, to take us on to bigger and better things. So it was a great situation to be in, and it was brand new and quite refreshing to be involved in that. As a footballer, you want the stardom, and you want to be, on the big screen, and all those things came your way. So all of a sudden, you were launched into a different platform.
Tell you what, let's have a look at this first season and how things looked back then and how things have changed, and actually how exciting it was for Manchester United, and that first goal as well, scored by Brian Dein.
Club screaming for the ball. He doesn't have to. Here is Shearer having another pop. Oh, and finding the corner.
And an excellent save by Neville Southall.
Arsenal in business, maybe. Yes, 2-1. Oh, what a great goal!
Saunders outside and Magnussen going through on his own. Saunders to his right, tries a chip.
He's going down and bowing out. It's with his head held high.
And Bruce! Can you believe that?
And I guess, Dan, you'll remember that season, won't you, as well, yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I straddled both the end of like Mickey really, the end of the old First Division where I made my debut for Crystal Palace, and then this quite incredible juggernaut that started to happen in the Premier League. And I actually dipped down into the what is now the Championship to Southend, had a really good season. Brian Clough there that we saw came to the end of his career. I joined when he left, and it was Frank Clark that was the manager. And we got promoted straight away, and then I think we're still the team with the highest that have been promoted, the highest finish. We finished third and got into the UEFA Cup then. But it was an incredible journey over those first 2 or 3 years, because you could feel something building quite simply because of how big the numbers were getting, how the league was able to get players like Gianfranco Zola, like Eric Cantona that we saw there, Jurgen Klinsmann, remember him coming in and scoring for Spurs and running it. All of a sudden the hype was justified. It wasn't just a new league, it was a league that was being able to draw some of the best talent from around Europe and the world.
Is that one of the best things that the Premier League did? Attracting these players around the world, and then, of course, being as globally watched as it is?
I think it was a collection of aspects of it, particularly when the stadium got improved, because that was important to give the fans a better experience, and of course getting in more talented managers, getting the overseas players suddenly coming in, and making the Premier League a special product to watch around the world.
It was something the Premier League that you would have obviously watched as the younger one of all of us, Kolo, from afar.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I was when I was young, I was in Ivory Coast, and to be honest, for me, I never thought about maybe coming to play in the Premier League, and you know, even in my dreams, you know, I was not thinking, because this league is a really special one. And when I had the chance to come and Mr. Dein, which I call my father, and Mr. Arsene Wenger give me the chance to come and play and to do a try. You know, I was willing to give everything I could, you know, and I done it, you know, and I'm so proud and so happy, and I can see many players coming from Ivory Coast, like my brother Yaya, Didier Drogba, Zukora, you know, few players coming from Ivory Coast came after me, and I'm really proud of that as well.
I've got a new contract for you, Kolo.
Still looks as if he can play.
I was going to say, he still looks about 21.
I know. But yeah, you are going to be coaching again, aren't you? You just wanted to mention it potentially, I think, with Celtic again. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You know, just I am in the moment where I need to make a decision. It's always difficult to stop playing football. You know, that's what I've been doing since I was young. You know, that's what I love. You know, still want to play, but 36 is a lot. You know, and I have now to just make a move and start, you know, thinking about the next step, which is coaching. I love the game. I want to stay in the game. I want to help young players. I want to give them my experience and give them advice to get better, which I learned from Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, Sol Campbell, Martin Keown. You know, they give me, I had the chance to play with those guys, and for me, I just want to give advice and help the young players improve themselves, work hard, give everything they go, because it's a beautiful game, you know.
Obviously, Mike, you've coached some of the best players in the world as well. What is it like to coach the best of the best?
Well, the beauty for me was that I'd come, you know, everybody seems to associate me all the time with Manchester United, but I was down at that lower level, you know, and it was purely watching the game as a youngster and wanting to do those things that you're watching, win an FA Cup, be involved at Wembley, play for your country. Then your dreams start to unfold and it takes you where you want to go, really. And you're right, it's exactly about decision making, how you're going to do it, take yourself away from being a player now, go into coaching. And what can you deliver to those people you are coaching, because they look and respect you for what you've done, what you've achieved, but they still want to be coached.
That's it.
And they still want to be the best players they can possibly be. And you have to change a little bit. Your mentality from player to coach takes time. It's a process. It's difficult. So you start off and you enjoy working with the young players because they give you all the encouragement. And young players look you in the eye. They take it in. They look at you because you're everything to them. And it's a great feeling when they listen to you. As you move up the ladder, then there's a little bit less of that sometimes because they reckon they know it all anyway. So it's not the case, but you have to find different skills, how to put yourself in their position. And I found it very easy at Manchester United because, one, I'd played there, two, I'd coached there, and then when I stepped into the assistant manager's role, I understood the decision-making side of things, because when Sir Alex used to leave you out of the team years ago, and the reasons where he was resting you, you suddenly realised there was more to it than that. You know, and you take all those incidents out of the equation. So you're part of something special. It's, you know, it's a fantastic feeling when you make the transition and you're successful doing it. And it is exactly like you say. It's a bug that's in you, and you want to carry on doing it because, let's be fair, most of us left school to play football, and we've never done anything else.
I think at the point I was thinking about just going another way. You know, maybe for that I can do another job. But after a few, you know, like things, I realized that what I've been learning for all my years was football, you know, and the way I can just express myself better will be in football. And I had just to find somewhere to be in the football environment, you know, and I just took the decision. At the point I was thinking going to finance, but I thought that, yeah, you can have a little bit of money, but you
That's
go
that
do a
contract
business.
that David give you at the start. Allows you to do that.
You can do a business, but you will make mistake because you don't know anything about finance, and you need time to learn that. You know, but in the football, I have a big step because I've been a football player. You know, I learn a lot by playing, but stepping to a coach is a different way. But of course, because I've been a professional player, I have a big step already, and it's much more easy for me to find a way.
And for you, obviously, Stan, you did make the move into a different career and went down the broadcast route. For you, working on the Premier League, and the monster that it is now, how did you find that? And did you ever sort of work on the games and look at the players and I'd love to be playing now?
No, it's strange actually, because I remember chatting to Gary Lineker about this, about kind of how he went from playing to broadcasting and never looked back. His playing career was done and he moved forward. And I was always very interested in broadcasting. Radio and television are very, very different, as you know. Radio is very much having to paint a picture for an audience, and it's a lot of games, 70, 80, 90 games a season over lots of different tournaments. Television is very different. I think now what we're seeing is, I mean, I would imagine, say, the mid-80s, if we were having this conversation, there were very few broadcast outlets for ex-players to go into. You would maybe have 5 or 6 players that would do the main television show, Match of the Day, maybe a little bit of local radio, but there are so many more outlets now. And I think that with the Premier League being able to provide a fantastic lifestyle for players, that they can choose, and I see this, you know, Gary Neville dipped in with Valencia, but then went back to Sky Sports, is that there are a lot of players that are getting to the end of their career and giving insight in a studio, being able to translate what they did on the pitch to viewers, listeners at home, rather than going down the coaching route. So it's a fascinating way to see the game. You're there, like I say, to be able to be eyes and ears for a viewer or a listener. But most players that you speak to still, if they are going to stay in the game, want to go down the coaching route, because like Kolo said, it's in your blood. Being out on the training ground, being out in the cold, creating a team, getting a group of players to hit benchmarks and success. But I think that growing band of players that come out of the game and want to go into broadcasting is bigger because there are more choices, and also because, let's not forget, it's a lot easier than going out there and coaching. You know, coaching jobs, Mickey will tell you, you have a situation whereby I think the shelf life is, for a manager, is a year, 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you can go and sign a contract with Sky Sports for 4 or 5 years and repeat that every 4 or 5 years, rather than getting the sack and going to a different job, going to a different country, sometimes the stability of what broadcasting can bring is a nice antidote to having played for a long, long time and moving around to different clubs as a player.
Do you not worry, though, about the money side of things, potentially, Mike? Because they earn so much money, there isn't that drive to have to go and have a career elsewhere or try something else once they finish playing football.
Yeah, there's always that now, you know, that the industry is driven by money, that's for sure. And the players now are being highly rewarded for being a footballer, for doing something that really they've been blessed with, you know, an ability. And it's down to football to get that out into the open, you know, to perform. But players now find themselves exactly in a position of choice. Whereas before, as a player, you know, salaries were okay, you know, but they weren't where they are now. But your decision then was stay in the game because there's nothing else. But now, with the money and the way your lifestyle's been led, you have more decisions to make. You have better decisions to make, more calculated decisions to make, based on the opportunity of staying in the game. You know, it was in the main played football, then you would like to do a coaching role, or you'd go into that field, whether it be youth. You know, now it's academy. It was youth in them days. It's now academy. But then would it be a reserve team, which is now a development squad? So everything has changed. But it still is. If that's what you're all about, coaching, then that's something you can't let go of. But you do have choices now, which is incredible. And the Premier League's created that, to be fair.
But I don't think you can blame the players for the salary levels that they are. I hear that all the time. People think, are they getting too much money? Personally, I don't think so. It's market forces. They're providing the entertainment. And the fact that television broadcasters are putting so much money into the game, well, they're providing the talent. They're giving us the opportunity to see that talent. So, and their shelf life is short, maybe 10 or 15 years at the top. And you're only talking about a very small percentage of players who are playing the game around the world get the really big money in any case.
Yeah, but discussing the really big money, I mean, how sustainable is that to continually spend not just tens of millions, but hundreds of millions of pounds now? Is it getting a bit out of control?
Maybe. Everything is relative to what it used to be. I'm very bullish on the market. I can't see it going down unless there's some absolute disaster happening, and I can't see that. All being well, I can see television, sponsors of the fans. The fact is the Premier League is running now to 96.5% capacity. Despite all the football on television, virtually every ground is full. Take the Arsenal Stadium, 60,000 people, week in, week out, with a wait list of another 60,000 people who can't get tickets. So you've got to be optimistic about it.
I think the concern from my perspective, and having done a lot of sort of interactive shows, phone-ins in particular, whereby you're asking, for me, still the most important people involved in the game, which are supporters in the professional game, is that they don't begrudge paying, whether it be, I mean, if you're an average fan and you're a season ticket holder and you want to watch all of the football, you're paying now for 2 different subscriptions. Sky have done a fantastic job, there's no doubt about that, in terms of putting their money where their mouth is in terms of broadcasting. BT have come along recently as well, but that's now Champions League, Europa League. Plus your season ticket. Is that the feedback that I get from a lot of supporters is that there isn't much being given back from football clubs. Now, there have been many people that have done calculations that why aren't season ticket prices coming down when the money coming into the game is going higher and higher? There seems to be a correlation that every time that a player's wages go up, that a club will say, well, we've got to pay Neymar £1 million a week, therefore your season ticket price at Paris Saint-Germain has to double. But that's quite disingenuous, because television money more than fills that hole. My only concern is not about the product, not about some of the best players in the world coming into the Premier League, is that when you buy a player for £100 million in the Premier League, then it forces not just clubs like Crystal Palace, West Bromwich Albion, Hull City to spend 20, or the pressure to spend 25, 30 million, but then my club, Aston Villa, that got relegated, have spent 15 million on players that have only played in the Championship further down, and that then trickles down. So I'd like to see a more equitable split, or a way that the money can trickle down into what is a fantastic pyramid system that we've got in English football, 92 plus professional clubs. I completely agree with David in terms of market forces will drive, you know, whatever anybody's prepared to pay. But I do think, and again, this is from feedback from supporters, is that they don't mind paying to go and watch their club anywhere, on television, the merchandise, or in the stands, but they feel that they would like a little bit back from the clubs that they support.
Can I just come in there? As a matter of fact, and I take your point, Stan, and it's well made, but it's fact that in fact, all of the Premier League clubs 2 years ago signed an agreement for travelling fans. They put a cap of £30 per ticket. So if you happen to be a West Brom supporter and you'll be playing at Manchester United, you'll only pay £30 for that ticket. And I think that's sensible. And most clubs now actually haven't put up their prices because of the amount of television money and sponsorship coming, and they can afford not to, because the television money represents 40 or 50% of the total income of their budget, which is quite enormous.
Quite.
Yeah, and I think for me, in my country, sorry, in my country, the league is not really doing well, because most of the fans there, they support some teams in the Premier League, and they are massive fans. You know, every week, every Saturday, they just sit there, you know, talking about players in the Premier League, you know, and that's, for them, is their life, you know, and that's where I think the Premier League became really strong, because we can't notice, but even in village, you know, Premier League, you know, team have the fans, you know, and that's so strong, you know. The Premier League is so strong back in Africa, back everywhere in the world, because there's great players, you know, and the games are really fantastic to watch. You know, there is goals, you know, and I think that comes as well for that. That's why the Premier League is that strong, you know, because it's coming from everywhere.
Okay, we're going to have a bit more of a chat with you, Kolo, because we want to have a look at another clip here, which is, of course, the famous Arsenal Invincibles season. Have a look at this.
Now you're talking.
There's the strike! Wonderful goal! Still King Clancy inside the penalty area. This will be a fantastic goal! Oh, that's mesmeric!
In the summer of 2003, Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich purchased Chelsea FC, and the new look squad is expected to bring success to West London.
It's Jimmy Floyd Hasselback, he's got that little room, and he's done it for Chelsea!
While at Manchester United, filling the boots of the departed David Beckham, there was a first league goal for a global superstar in the making.
Cristiano Ronaldo whipped in with pace and straight in.
Southampton were fourth by Christmas when they beat newly promoted Portsmouth in the Premier League's first ever South Coast derby. February marks a defining moment in the season, the Gunners coming from behind to beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge.
They've done it again! Arsenal have come back from one down to lead against Chelsea.
Still unbeaten, Wenger's side also came from a losing position to overcome Liverpool 4-2 at Highbury. Thierry Henry, who would surpass 100 Premier League goals during the campaign, stole the show with a hat-trick.
He's onside! Thierry Henry, hat-trick hero!
Liverpool would eventually finish fourth, with Dietmar Hammann's goal against Portsmouth claiming goal of the season. Blackburn keeper Brad Friedel even got in on the act, scoring an unlikely goal at Charlton. The Addicts' impressive season tailed off, but still saw them claim seventh, their highest finish in the Premier League. Their battling 2-2 draw with Leicester resulted in the Foxes' relegation. Wolves joined Leicester, but the biggest surprise was the demise of Leeds United. Just 3 seasons after reaching the Champions League semi-final, they dropped to the second tier. At arch-rivals Tottenham, Arsenal clinched the point they needed to regain the title.
It's Arsenal's title. Arsenal are the new Premier League champions.
26 wins, 12 draws, no losses. The Invincibles, the first and only Premier League side to go the season undefeated.
There you have it. You obviously enjoy watching back over. It's a good chance to do this, to
I
reminisce.
could watch that all day long.
Yeah. What did it feel like at the time? What was the feeling?
Oh, it was just fantastic. I mean, it was poetry in motion. You didn't want it to end because the players, and Kolo was in the squad. I think that we had world-class players in every position. And when you think, you know, from the back, you had Jens Lehmann and Loren, Sol Campbell, Kolo, Ashley Cole, and then midfield with Gilberto Silva, Edu, Patrick Vieira, Robert Pires, Dennis Bergkamp, Thierry. I mean, in every position there was just a world-class player. It was a joy to watch. And they had such confidence in themselves.
Was that Kolo the best team, do you think, you've played in?
Of course, for me, of course. You know, it was unbelievable. I was so lucky to be part of this team, yeah. You know, and to be able to play with such players. You know, for me, you know, I learned a lot from them, and people see them, but they're great guys. We was a family.
Yeah. Hey, can I tell you a lovely story? In 2014, a couple of years ago, in the World Cup in Brazil, I hosted a dinner one evening, and Gilberto Silva and Edu were my guests. And I said to Gilberto, who's a very lovely lad, I said, Gilberto, what was it like playing in the Invincible team? And he thought a minute, and he said, Mr. Dein, I'll give you an example, and I'll stand up for this. He said, when we were in the corridor just waiting to go out on the pitch, we would all be in a line, and always we had Patrick Vieira first, then Jens Lehmann, then Thierry, then Kolo, and Gilberto. And he said, and we'd see the opposition opposite us. Patrick, just before we were going out, would get a little knowing nod, right, to Thierry, and then it would pass down to Jens and to Kolo, and they would all give each other a nod that we're going to do it today, we're going to beat the opposition. Then we would turn around to the opposition and we could see a sense almost of fear in their eyes. We felt we were going to win. And they had that inner confidence. And it just, game from game, they didn't feel that they could get beaten.
Amazing time, you know. Trainings was really, really hard because we had fantastic players all over the pitch, you know. And for me, by training was harder than some games, you know. That showed the strength, you know, of the squad and the quality and the focus of every player, you know. And for me, I remember a guy like Dennis Bergkamp, which for me is the best player I played with on my career. This guy was a great example, and you know, he's incredible. You know, there is no word, to be honest. You know, it was fantastic, and I really have like good memories. We used to go together for dinner. You know, I remember that Patrick Vieira used to make organized party in his house. You know, for us come to have a dinner, eat. And we was always together. It wasn't only on the pitch, you know. And on the what happened, because we were so close outside the pitch, when we was on the pitch, we was able to just fight for each other, back up each other all the time. You know, one player make a mistake, we was going to battle for him and try to help him. You know, and that's was really strong. We used to love each other, to be honest. You know, our family, we used to get together, our wives, you know, and that was amazing. You know, that was the best thing ever happened in my career, definitely.
The other father in the family, of course, Arsene Wenger. What do you think he brought to the Premier League that other managers weren't doing at the time?
I think he actually revolutionised the Premier League in many respects when it came to the attitude towards training, towards discipline, towards dietary control. He brought it was a whole new regime. And I used to call it the broccoli and Evian water diet. I mean, people couldn't believe it. He did away. I mean, this was a lovely story. After a couple of weeks, I happened to be on the team coach coming back from Aston Villa. And the boys always got a very nice meal on the coach. And at the end of the meal, we turned around, all the boys started chanting, "We want our Mars bars back. We want our Mars bars back." And Arsene Wenger went like, "Oh no," because he changed everybody's habit. He wanted to get them fitter. And he used to say to the boys, "You listen to me, I'll give you another couple of years at the end of your contract. You'll be fitter and better."
Well, the proof was in the pudding as well, because
no
the guys extended their careers by a long way.
Yeah.
You know, when that inevitability comes of retirement, they've still got 3 or 4 years left in them through just changing the subtleties or changing the way they went about their professionalism.
It's true.
It's immense.
And everybody followed from that.
And obviously he's still going strong. There are obviously a few issues with Arsenal this season. I'm sure we'd love to go back to the days of going through a season unbeaten.
Well, we'd like that same squad back again, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
That would help.
That would help. Can you see Arsene Wenger being there for much longer? He still obviously seems to have the passion and the love. Other people some fans might not want him there. A lot of fans do. It's a very difficult one, this, isn't it? Because he is so respected.
That's a loaded question, Hayley, because I know whatever I'm going to say is going to be headlines tomorrow. All I will say, he's got a love affair with the club.
Yeah. And you'd probably say the same, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. You know, it's been for me. He done a lot for Arsenal. You know, and the thing I will tell with Mr. Wenger, for me, is somebody who he can see talent in young players. You know, if you look at how many players he just made them shy, you know, is that amazing. You know, of course, you know, right now, you know, it's a tough time, of course, you know, but you know, he's a fantastic manager. You know, he loved the club, and that's why he's still there. You know, he want to be successful with this club. He want the best for this club. You know, of course, you know, I know the situation is not easy, but he will fight until I think he will see he will decide definitely.
I think the interesting thing for me, sort of observing again, covering games and narratives and stories, is that you look at Arsenal and Manchester United that were on an even keel mid-2000s, swapping and changing in terms of winning titles. And you look at Sir Alex Ferguson that continued to win the big trophies season in, season out until he left. And again, I'm sure Mickey will concur with this, is that because he was the top man at the club, there are two ways you can do it. You can either be a benign dictator and say, I'm going to dictate to everybody and it's my way or the highway, or you can bring people in that freshen up your outlook. And I think that what Sir Alex Ferguson did, if you remember, he had a number of assistants. And again, I'm sure Mickey would tell you that although it was the boss, and ultimately the boss had his say, is that all of those opinions were shared and given. Now, there is a reason, and David is very modest, of course, as is Kolo. And there is a reason why people talk day in, day out about if Arsenal lose a game or they're going through a bad spell. And Arsenal fans, and I follow social media, as you know, very closely and have done for a decade now, is that David's name crops up. Some of the big names in the Invincibles crop up because what they would like to see, it's a very difficult situation as a football fan that appreciates so much what Arsene Wenger has brought to English football for all of the reasons that David has said. But you almost wish that, like Sir Alex Ferguson, that realised that by freshening up maybe the backroom staff, different ideas, somebody to maybe say yes or no, I don't think we should do this, would have been to his benefit, because I don't think anybody in English football mistakes or doesn't realise the impact that Arsene Wenger has made on English football. Huge impact. Technically, he's a genuinely nice man, a genuinely giving of his time kind of person. But also, as a broadcaster, as a journalist, ex-players, current players, they want to actually see Arsenal do well. The stadium is now set up as a world-class venue. They do try and play football in the right way. But I do wonder, for some of those characters that you mentioned, I interviewed Patrick Vieira in New York a couple of years ago. We had a really candid sit-down for a couple of hours. And like Kolo, he was talking about that Invincibles side and the sides that he played for. And things kept on cropping up. Leadership, charisma, character, personality, that went through all of these guys. That, let's be honest, that when Arsenal don't play well in 2016, 17 or 15, that's the thing that gets questioned. And I just wonder whether it be a Mike Phelan, a Carlos Queiroz, a Brian Kidd, that if Arsene Wenger would have constantly evolved his backroom staff to bring in a Bergkamp or a Dixon or a Winterburn, that would have said, no, Gaffer, I think we should do it like this, that maybe they would have had the continued success that these guys initially built the platform for them.
Okay. Let's head on to look at the battle between Manchester United. I don't want to put him on the spot, I feel too terrible. Between Manchester United and Manchester City, of course. It was the season that produced that game, that goal, and that piece of commentary. So have a look at this.
Crouch, oh, what an effort! That is the 20,000th goal in the Premier League.
Here's Modric, it's beautifully struck.
It's a terrific run by Ben Arthur. He could go all the way. He has gone all the way.
Lifted up for Van Persie! What a goal from Robin Van Persie! Cisse. Oh, that is sensational!
It is all over for Bolton. Their 11-year Premier League adventure comes to an end.
Blackburn Rovers are relegated.
Checo scores! 4 minutes to save themselves! Aguero! Staggering! Just staggering! He's won the league with 90 seconds of stoppage time to play! It's just the most extraordinary scenario you could have dreamt up! Where does football go from here?
Oh. Yeah, the elation for City and the heartbreak if you're a Manchester United fan as well. And watching that split screen as I did on Sky on that final game of the season, just couldn't believe what I was seeing. What did it feel like for you, Mike?
I can't really tell you explicitly, but that was probably the worst moment in my career, really. Simply because we played Sunderland. Our game had finished, and it's probably the only time where Fergie's rule didn't really come out on top, because the extra time was being played down at Manchester City. But we'd finished, we'd done our job, we thought we'd done enough, because the result at that time, I think, was level pegging at the other game. And then all of a sudden, it changed dramatically. And we were still out there on the field of play, because we're just waiting, thinking, it's done, it's over, we've got it again. And then all of a sudden, wallop, you know, City have done it. And that moment was the worst feeling ever, because the one reason it felt worse was because we weren't even on our own ground. It was somewhere else, and we couldn't do any more than what we'd already done. And to lose it on goal difference was heartbreaking, really. But what I was talking before, what really came back to me was actually seeing how it happened afterwards, when you get on that team bus and it's being played over and over again. Now, a lot of people have suffered at the hands of Manchester United in the past, you know, where we've been very successful at that time. But to actually see how it all developed and how it happened, yes, there is the elation because Man City themselves are celebrating, but then you start to question, why did it happen? Why did the opposition allow that to happen? So you start to get a little bit, you know, pickety about, that shouldn't, what was that player doing that for? And why did he give that ball away there? Because if I remember rightly, the ball was with the opposition down by the touchline, and they went the whole length of the pitch and scored. But to see that, it's just like, oh, this can't be right. So you're literally swearing at the TV screen, or you're calling another player, and because it just feels so not right at the time. But it was the launch of Manchester City as well from that moment on.
And did you know that you were part of something special when you were at City, Kolo?
Yeah, of course. You know, for me as well, this is one of really, really top club as well. And I was sure that the club was going to get better and better. At the same time, when we to win that game was so important, because we didn't play well. You know, we was a little bit stressed. You know, and QPR done well. And they made us work really, really, really hard. But at the end of the day, you know, I think we played a great, we was composed, you know. And when I saw Mario took the ball and he went on the box, you know, and he just passed the ball and he fell down, you know. And we all know Mario is, you know, can be sometimes difficult, you know. But he really worked really hard, you know, and that showed that we wanted really to win that game. And he passed the ball to Aguero, and we all know Aguero, you know, he's somebody really calm, somebody really composed, because you had to be calm to score this goal, you know, and he done that, and that was, you know, one of the best feeling for me as well, for sure.
So what he's saying is, the game plan worked. They wait till the very last kick of the game to win the league. Fantastic.
You know, Hayley, football is made up of special moments, and I always call it, football is theatre without a script. You don't know what's going to happen next. You know, a couple of years ago, seeing Leicester City winning the Premier League title was phenomenal. It's one of the best things, apart from the Invincibles, that's happened to the Premier League.
We're going to have a look at that in a little moment as well. But let's still focus, because I want to actually ask Kolo, going back to this City game and United, did you watch it back? Did you watch the split screen? Did you see how that had happened? Did you go back and have a look?
Yeah, of course. You know, you always, after that, you always go back and just watch what happened, you know. And honestly, you know, to win Premier League is always something really special, you know, and especially to win that against United. You know, that was amazing, you know, and we just you just keep thinking about that, you know. It was just few seconds, you know, and then you won the league, and that's something you never forget, you know, and I always remind that, definitely.
Was Leicester's win, do you think, let's talk about that, something that the Premier League needed to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, again, the sort of, when you have a league, and again going back to what David said about the sort of paucity of football on television for a long time, and when we were all growing up various ages, there was nowhere near. It was a fraction of the amount of football on the television. So obviously we went from famine to feast of 24-hour, you can get every league all through the day on replay, on demand. So that means that stories have to keep changing. The biggest, single biggest issue again when I speak to football fans on phone-ins is that television and radio shows only concentrate on Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester City. There's obviously a reason for that because they're at the top of the league and it's very competitive. But it's easy to get drawn into that and forget that there's football going on elsewhere around the world. We had that little discussion a bit earlier. So I think that the fact that a club that were one of the relegation candidates in the world's toughest league, whether it's the best is open to debate, whether it's as technically as good as La Liga, whether we get the supreme talented players of Neymar, Ronaldo, Messi at their best is open for debate. But if you've played in the Premier League, it is the toughest league because every single week, every single team is asking you multiple questions. And that doesn't happen in any other league. Any other league. Maybe the Championship, if you're looking to get promoted, there it is week in and week out you're being tested. So the fact that there's this East Midlands provincial club. I mean, I had my best 2 years at Nottingham Forest, and when I joined the club, Brian Clough had left, but he'd brought all the players into the club. And that was a small provincial East Midlands club that went on and not only won the league, but then they won back-to-back European Cups. I mean, talk about miracles. Is to see this Leicester story build week in and week out. I was at the first game of the season commentating, and it was Leicester against Spurs. Dele Alli scored his first Spurs goal. And you could see, everybody could pick off the top of their heads. What are the attributes that Leicester have? Great team spirit, lots of experience, incredible pace up front with Vardy, with Morris playing in that sort of pocket in behind. But it grew and it grew and it grew. And I think that we were all still asking the question 2 weeks before the season finished. Like, they can't do it. They're gonna collapse. Kept on grinding out, keeping clean sheets. One of the biggest topics this season, whether it be Arsenal, whether it be Liverpool, Manchester City, have any of them made their defence much, much better to be able to keep clean sheets? Leicester did. Robert Huth, Morgan, Simpson, Fuchs, with Kasper Schmeichel. You know the names. You know they put their bodies on the line. But to be there at the KP Stadium on the final day, I was pitchside doing interviews and Jamie Vardy came over and Claudio and the people from King Power that obviously own the club were walking around. It was surreal with a big gold frame of the King of Thailand and walking around and kind of... For somebody that has commentated and played in so many Premier League games, to see a club that had no right, if you're looking at it, I mean, it pretty much evens out that the club that spend the 7th most amount of money finish 7th or 8th or 6th in a good season. For them to be relegation candidates and to win the league is quite extraordinary. And I think that if you're Richard Scudamore, if you're an administrator at the Premier League, you can genuinely now go and sell that product to anybody in the world and say, the one thing it isn't, just as we thought it may be predictable, it became the least predictable sporting league in the world to watch. So it was a massive shot in the arm for other clubs as well that dared to dream.
We're pretty much coming to the end, but just a couple of very quick, brief questions. Huddersfield got the best record so far in the league at the moment, haven't conceded a goal.
They were -2 at the end of the Championship season. So I'm looking at it, trying to analyse it as a football analyst. And they didn't score goals in the Championship. They weren't putting teams away in the Championship. So of course, if you go into the Premier League in the first couple of games, you don't hit the ground running, it becomes a very tough time, and it could be a tough time for them. There's nothing's been won or lost yet. But again, they come into the league, some really shrewd signings. Moy, the lad from Manchester City, I think has been a revelation for them. David Wagner's been very positive, the way that they do the sort of Dortmund thing of going over to the fans at the end and clapping. There's a momentum there. So they've started the season very well. And wish them all the best because, of course, they're a very grand old club.
So let's put you on the spot and get predictions for this season as to who you think. Let's just go with winning the league. Let's not focus on the negatives of who might go down. Give me an answer.
Manchester United.
Yeah.
I think that biggest squad, strongest squad, most experience. Zlatan's come back that I think he's the modern-day Cantona in terms of what he could possibly pass on in the dressing room, particularly to some of the younger players, the Pogbas, Rashfords. Spent well. Those players have come into the side. Players that were bought last year are now starting to play very well. I would have had Chelsea, but I think that Manchester United look extremely strong.
He's right, isn't he, Kolo? Yeah? You don't agree,
No, I
maybe?
think they're doing well, to be honest. United look really, really strong. For me, I will go for Man City, because I think they have a really good manager. He's a really, really good manager, and the way they play as well is a good way to play football. Of course, in the Premier League, it's more tough, but I think that the team will gel. Man City will gel, and because Guardiola is just preparing something, and I think that will pay.
Mike?
I still think Chelsea is the team to beat, simply because the momentum is there. Yeah, they've started a little bit slow. No league's ever won in the first 3 games of a season. The one thing that may be against them this time is the European side of things. Same for Manchester United. They're back into the big competition. But they have built a squad, Manchester United, which is far greater than it has been. But I still think Chelsea are the one, simply because they hold it. They don't want to let it go. And I think, even though the window hasn't been massive this summer, there's still January to come. And I think if they're in that at that time, they will be a hard team to beat.
What about a word of advice for Huddersfield? You obviously found yourself in a similar position, having a really good start to the season with Hull, but it does get tougher after that, doesn't it?
Yeah, listen, we're all football people. In reality, we know exactly what's around the corner. You're one defeat away from major issues, but all you can do is the hard miles. I remember at Hull starting the season with just promoted. I'm caretaker. I have 13 senior players and 5 under 18s. That's my squad going into the Premier League. Then everything's done on transfer deadline day, and it's just crash bang wallop. And you realise you've got yourself into a nice position because you've won your first 2 games. The first game you win is at your home ground against the champions. So straight away, expectation level's gone through the roof, and maybe the right thing to do is stay with 13 players and 5 kids. Well, as a football person, it's impossible. Then you try and add to that, and then results don't go your way. Performances stay credible, but you don't get the results. And we know that. We know that that's going to happen. It's just how you handle that situation, and the inevitable happens, and maybe that's preparation, bad preparation at the start. We still talk now about transfers. Do we do them early? Do we do them late? Every club has a different idea of how to do things because there is a cost involved in all that. But for me, it was a tremendous start. Manager of the month. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that when you're a caretaker. And then after that, it's you really realise you're in the best league against the best players, and you actually know what you're going to come up against. And it can be lonely. It can be different.
David, who do you feel is looking strongest to potentially win the Premier League?
Well, if it can't be Arsenal, I wish Mike every success.
Oh. What next for the Premier League? Where does it go from here?
As I said, I'm very positive. I'm very bullish. I do think there's one area that has to be looked at, and that is financial fair play. I'm worried about that. I think there is so much money, and you don't want necessarily the guys who've got the deepest pockets, the deepest wallets. Then it becomes a procession. We don't want that to happen. I think there's got to be a balance, and it has been. The fact that you've seen, as we said before, Leicester winning. So I think there has to, and now it's just spun out of all. I mean, it has gone out of control almost when you consider how much money is being spent. But I'm very positive. I think the league is going to go from strength to strength. I can see that the broadcasters desperately want the product even more, which is healthy. So I can good luck to everybody involved in the game, because I think it's a wonderful product, Premier League, and I'm very happy when I travel around the world. Last year you go to China or Japan and you see young kids with the shirt with Vardy on the back. It's football it's become a global game. It's wonderful to see.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your attendance here as well. To Stan, Kolo, Mike and to David. Thank you very much indeed. It doesn't quite end there. Just to let you know, if you're off to Qatar next, enjoy, have fun. And if you're venturing out to China as well, take care there. And it doesn't quite end there, because Happy birthday to you. Happy
Oh, my
birthday
word.
to you. It's David's birthday, or it has been his birthday.
It's actually tomorrow.
It's
but
tomorrow.
It's
Well,
very kind of you.
A little early birthday.
Come on, everyone. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Wow.
Happy birthday, dear David. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Oh, that was a big surprise. Look at that. Thank you very much.
It's just killing time.
I'm glad
there,
you
isn't
didn't put all the candles. It would have been a fire hazard if there had been all the candles.
I just wanted to say, David, there are friends and there are some special friends, but you're David Dein.
Thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, so very much indeed. I feel honoured. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's beautiful.